Welcome back to Real 21, where I'm watching my way through the New York Times 100 Best Movies of the 21st Century, one film at a time in countdown order. I'm Nathan Chandler, and today we're at number 94 with Minority Report, directed by Steven Spielberg. Now, Minority Report was one of those movies that surprised me a little bit when I first saw it appear on this list. Not because I disliked the film. I've actually always liked it, but it just never personally registered to me as one of the defining films of the century. I had seen it before, probably around the time it originally came out, because I specifically remember one of my roommates owning the DVD back in college or shortly after. And while I always remembered enjoying it, it wasn't one that I revisited often or heard people constantly champion as one of Spielberg's absolute best. But at the same time, I mean, it's Spielberg, and I'm a huge Steven Spielberg fan. I mean, who isn't? So revisiting it was exciting regardless, because even Spielberg's lesser films are usually still more interesting than most filmmakers' best work. And honestly, the one thing I always remembered vividly from this movie was the eyeballs. The retina scans, the eyeball imagery, the idea that your eyes basically become your identity in this world. That stuff clearly made a lasting impression on me because it instantly came flooding back while revisiting the film. If you aren't familiar with Minority Report, it's set in the future where Washington, D.C. has implemented something called the PreCrime Division, led by Chief John Anderton, played by Tom Cruise. Though the use of three psychic beings known as precogs, the division can foresee murders before they happen and arrest people before the crime is committed. And honestly, it's a fantastic setup because right away, the movie asks a fascinating question. If someone is going to commit murder in the future, are they already guilty? But then Spielberg flips the premise on its head because the system suddenly predicts that Anderton himself will commit a murder. And now the guy who completely believes in the system suddenly becomes hunted by it. At first, Anderton naturally thinks he's being set up, especially with the arrival of Danny Whitwer, played by Colin Farrell, who's already investigating whether the pre-crime division is legitimate in the first place. So the movie becomes this giant mystery as Anderton goes on the run, trying to figure out not only who the supposed victim is, but why he would ever commit murder at all. And honestly, this is where the movie works best for me. The mystery itself is genuinely compelling. Spielberg does a great job establishing the stakes, the rules of this world, and the emotional investment behind Anderton's character. You fully buy into the panic and confusion because this is someone who has dedicated his life to the system suddenly questioning everything about it. What struck me most revisiting Minority Report now, though, is just how ahead of its time it feels. The personalized advertising, the constant surveillance, the algorithms predicting behavior, the invasion of privacy. There's a sequence where Anderton walks through a mall and advertisements instantly recognize him and start catering directly to his past purchases and interests. All these videos pop up. This is very much not unlike scrolling through my Instagram feed these days. But watching that scene in 2026 honestly feels incredibly accurate. That's basically the world that we live in. And that's really where the film becomes interesting because underneath the blockbuster spectacle, Spielberg is exploring some genuinely fascinating ethical questions. How much freedom are people willing to sacrifice in exchange for safety? If a system could accurately predict crimes before they happen, should we actually trust it? And watching it now, especially knowing this came out during the post 9/11 and George W. Bush era, you can absolutely feel some of those anxieties baked into the story. This idea of the government expanding its authority under the promise of keeping people safe feels deeply connected to that moment in time. Now, overall, I did enjoy revisiting the movie, but I also found myself a little conflicted with certain aspects of it. Because underneath all the spectacle, this is actually a really dark story. The movie opens with a husband about to murder his wife and her lover. Anderton's backstory involving the kidnapping of his son completely shattered his marriage. There are jump scares throughout the movie. I'll admit some got me. And of course, there's the constant unsettling use of eyeballs and surveillance imagery. And honestly, part of me found myself wishing the movie leaned even harder into those darker images and psychological imagery. Because while the action scenes are obviously well directed, Spielberg is Spielberg after all, I was personally much more invested in the mystery and ethical questions than I was in Tom Cruise leaping across automated cars or fighting cops with jetpacks. The story unfolding was always the thing pulling me through the movie, not the green screen action scenes. I also found the visual style really interesting revisiting it now because it feels very representative of early 2000s blockbuster filmmaking. Everything has this cool blue haze and glossy futuristic sheen that became really common in sci-fi and action movies during that era. And honestly, that aesthetic has never fully been my favorite, but I can absolutely appreciate how innovative and slick it probably felt at the time. Performance-wise, Cruise is doing exactly you want Tom Cruise to do in a sci-fi action thriller. He completely carries the movie with his intensity and movie star charisma. And Colin Farrell is also really solid here. Even if this isn't necessarily one of the defining performances people think of first from either actor's career, it's fun to see them act together. But ultimately, it's the concept and the mystery that linger more than anything else. Okay, so where do I ultimately land on Minority Report? I definitely appreciated it more revisiting it now than I did in my memory. I think it's very smart, entertaining, and an ambitious sci-fi blockbuster from one of the greatest directors ever. But personally, I still don't know if it fully penetrates that upper tier of essential films of the 21st century for me. And maybe I just haven't heard the right argument yet from someone who passionately considers this one of the defining films of the century. Because honestly, I'd welcome that debate. All right, let's wrap it up with a few quick categories. Overall rating, 3.5 stars. Pop culture footprint, a respected and influential sci-fi blockbuster that helped shake the sleek futuristic aesthetic of early 2000s cinema, though not one that feels as culturally dominant today as some other Spielberg films. Rewatchability, 3.5 out of 5. The mystery and pacing make it an easy movie to revisit, especially as a randomly on TV kind of watch. Does it make you think? It does, about surveillance culture, predictive technology, free will versus determinism, and how much freedom society is willing to sacrifice in exchange for safety. Is it a conversation starter? I would say moderately. The ethical questions surrounding pre-crime are fascinating, though the movie ultimately plays more as an entertaining thriller than a deeply debated philosophical sci-fi film. Does it hold up? I would say yeah. Some visual effects in the early 2000s digital sheen feel dated at times, but the central themes and ideas feel even more relevant today. Where'd I place it? I would say towards the lower end of this list personally. It's a very entertaining and ambitious Spielberg sci-fi thriller, but not one that fully penetrates the upper tier of essential 21st century films for me. Up next, we trade futuristic sci-fi for corporate paranoia with Michael Clayton, starring George Clooney and directed by Tony Gilroy. Until next time, keep watching, stay curious, and trust the list, at least for now.